Well, the housing Grinch has come to the Canadian housing market just in time for Christmas. Hey everybody, welcome to the weekly news recap here on Bald Prairie Real Estate. My name is Matthew Pfeifer, real estate agent in Regina, and that's my trusted assistant, 𝗤𝗲𝗲𝗲𝗲. Yeah, we're going to be going through some numbers on this week's news recap here that I don't think is pointing to anything but Canadian real estate getting more unaffordable. But before we do that, let's get into another one of my terrible jokes. Why can't pirates finish singing the alphabet? Because they always get lost at sea. If you have a terrible joke that I can use in a future episode, put it in the comments below. Let's get into this week's Canadian real estate news. This first article is out of Canadian Mortgage Trends, and it's talking specifically about CIBC and what's going on with negative amortization. Now, this article specifically only looks at CIBC's numbers, but if you go through all the different banks, you're going to see these same trends pretty much across the board. And specifically talking about negative amortizations, this was a hot button topic earlier in the year and into last year even, because of how much interest rates had gone up. Those that are on variable rate mortgages but have those fixed payments saw those amortizations extend out, and everyone was talking how this was going to be a significant problem. We're going to see all of these forced sellers have to come to the market because of how much their amortizations had been extended out. They were just never going to be able to pay off these houses. And to some extent, there's some truth to that. But much like we've seen pretty much anytime something gets hyped up in the news, it ends up becoming a lot less of an issue than what gets all the hype and attention, because we have seen all year long negative amortizations. In this case, CIBC categorizes those as over 35 years. Those clients have been reducing because what's been happening is they've been working on getting caught up on their mortgage, getting back on track. They've gone through renewals, or they've just transferred into a fixed payment product, which forces them to get back on track. Now, there's still a significant portion of those that are in that negative amortization situation or have those over 35-year mortgages. Now, in the chart I've got up here, I think there's an error in the top bar there because they go Q4, Q3, Q4. I believe this chart on the top is supposed to say Q1 of 2023, Q2 of 2023, and Q3 of 2023. As you can see, they started the year with 26% of their mortgage portfolio had amortizations of 35 years or more. You can't do a 35-year mortgage in Canada. The longest you can do is 30 through any of the banks or regular mortgage lenders. Private lenders, doesn't matter, different story. And they've trended now down to 22%. This number needs to get to 0 eventually here, unless they change rules on amortization lengths. That's always up for debate. But the whole idea that there was this massive amount of people that were never able to pay their mortgages, again, more hype than actual reality. There's still a lot of people that are in trouble, and this is going to have to get cleaned up. Some people are just sitting waiting as well. This potentially could have been cleaned up earlier. There's some people that are definitely just sitting saying, you know what, rates are going to come down at some point here. They're making their own predictions when they think rates are going to come down. They're just waiting for rates to come down to shorten amortization. Because just like amortizations got extended out when interest rates went up, they will also come down with these fixed payment variable mortgages when interest rates come down, if they do. And some people are just waiting for that to happen as well. Just out this week was the newest inflation numbers from Stats Canada, and it remained unchanged at 3.1%. So going into this release, the market was kind of expecting that we'd see inflation at 2.9%. So 3.1, obviously higher than what the market expected. We have seen, though, some good signs. Food inflation has continued to trend down. It was up over 8% earlier this year. It's now down to 4.5%, I believe it was. Still, this is higher than Bank of Canada wants it to be. And had we seen this drop into 2.9, 2.8, 2.7, that would have continued kind of the expectation we're seeing from the market that we're going to see rate hikes potentially in the spring of 2024. Now that we haven't seen it again, this is just 1 month, but if we continue to see inflation kind of hovering around this 3% range or even potentially trend up, that reduces the likelihood the Bank of Canada will reduce rates. If we continue to see it trend down, the bank has already come out, 𝗃𝗏𝗀's come out and said it, and again, I get it, 𝗃𝗏𝗀 has said a lot of things that turned out to not be true, but they're kind of already signaling that should we see this trend continuing down towards that target rate, that they will start reducing rates. 30% of the inflation is still made up of higher mortgage interest rate costs alone. Now, again, this is not a realistic scenario, but just kind of follow me for this here. if you take out the rent increases we've seen in the last year and the mortgage interest cost increase we've seen this last year, the inflation rate would be at like 1.5%. So the Bank of Canada is kind of fueling their own inflation numbers by having interest rates as high as they are. Again, I know stripping those out, it's not realistic, but just for argument's sake, I'm just trying to demonstrate here how much of an impact higher interest rates have had. Of course, the other part of that, when I talked about rent increases, that I'm going to be talking about in a second here, but we've seen rent go up like crazy, and that has been driven primarily by massive immigration in Canada. So if we start to get those two things under control, we'll likely see inflation continue to trend down. This article is out of BNN, and it's talking about CMHC's most recent housing starts data, and it's going in the wrong direction. So when CMHC does these housing starts, it's a rolling average, meaning it does take time for impacts to be felt in these numbers. I talked about it early in the year, and we're actually seeing housing starts kind of trending up. I said, don't read into this because this is essentially a lagging indicator. This is not going to continue. We're going to see housing starts drop off, and we're now starting to see that. This is a 22% drop in housing starts, and I expect that to continue to get worse. We're likely going to see, maybe not in the 2023 numbers once they're all done, but probably in the 2024 numbers, a massive drop off in new construction starts. So just to kind of put things in perspective, in a very busy year, we'll see about 250,000, sometimes 275,000 housing completions in a year. Now, CMHC tracks starts. Starts obviously important. Completions are more important, but that's about how many houses built. About 250 to 275,000 houses in a very busy year. I know CMHC stats kind of make it look like that's we're building a month. No, it's just the way they report it. And I'm going to be talking about this in terms of population growth. Right now, we're seeing that well exceed our ability to build houses in Canada. And with higher interest rates, there's a lot of projects that have been shelved this year. And we're not seeing that in the numbers until recently, because earlier in the year when we were seeing housing starts increase, that was primarily due to projects that were already ready to go, basically shovels in the ground, and they were going to continue ahead, whether they had lower financing arrangements or not. They're kind of at the point where they had to start those projects. Now we're at the point where projects that were a little bit early in the planning phases, they're simply just not going to start these projects anymore because they just don't make any financial sense. The builder developer cannot make money with the cost of construction, not only just higher interest rates, but also the higher cost of materials. Again, partially driven by higher inflation. All of that is making it really hard to get a lot of projects off the ground. We started to see this early in the year. Single family home starts had fallen off a cliff. That was primarily due to a lack of buyers out there for these. And now we're starting to see it in the multifamily segment. These are multi-million-dollar projects. Of course, the cost to finance that is extreme when you start doubling and tripling your interest costs to build that. And these projects aren't financially viable anymore. This problem is going to get worse before it gets better. I think we're going to see 2024 numbers that look really, really ugly as this rolling average continues on. This article here kind of, I think, sums up a lot of the problems in the Canadian real estate market, and that is population growth right now. Right now in Canada, we're setting records any way you look at it for population growth. Let's go through all the numbers and then go through the implications of this in just a second here. Starting off, 400,000 people came to Canada in last quarter. That's the last 90 days. It wasn't many years ago that we saw population, the immigration consistent at about 225,000 people a year. Now we've got our 400,000 in a quarter, 200,000 going to Ontario. In the last year, Canada's population has grown by over 1.2 million people. 800,000 of those are temporary workers or temporary visas, so temporary workers, international students, etc. That is putting significant strain on all different elements of Canadian life. Right now, the population growth in Canada by percentage is the most of any developed nation. It outpaces China, it outpaces India. In fact, really only African nations are outpacing Canada for population growth. This is the fastest we've seen Canada growing since the 40s and 50s. This population growth is putting strain on a lot of systems right now, but I truly don't believe we are going to see the real impact of this for years down the road. And hear me out as to why. Right now, we've seen a massive spike in the price of rent, double digits year over year for the last 2 years. And that is because as all of these people come to Canada, they need somewhere to live. For the most part, they're going to rent right off the bat. Well, we've seen it pushed up the price of rent. Look how hard it is to rent a place pretty much anywhere in Canada and how much it costs. And I'm working on a video and I'm calling it right now, my working title is Canada's Next Real Estate Boom, because in probably 3 to 5 years, these people are going to be looking to purchase their first home in Canada. And that is going to put a lot of strain on the resale market, the resale side of residential real estate in Canada. So that's one problem that's working its way through the system. But also look at the impact it's going to have on healthcare and a whole bunch of other services provided in Canada. These are all problems that are going to be coming up in the future. So why is the government doing this right now? Really, it comes down to they're trying to paper over the cracks in the economy. Canada's economy is not in a great position. In fact, if you take it per capita, we've actually been in a recession in Canada for the better part of the last year, because although GDP has been increasing, it's increasing slower than the pace of population increase, meaning that individually people are less well off. And really, this is also driving inflation as well. As people come to Canada, look what's going to happen. They're going to have to find somewhere to rent. They're going to have to furnish that place. They're going to have to buy things like clothing and jackets and cell phones and everything else. And that all drives the inflation that we're seeing right now. That's a huge part of the inflation. There's a whole bunch of other things, but that's a huge driver right now. So massive population increase is putting a ton of strain on the rental market. It's putting a ton of strain on inflation. And the government, other than paying lip service to this, not only do I think they don't care, I think they want to continue this because they need to make these GDP numbers look good. And this is the easiest way that they can do that right now. Be damned the consequences coming in the future, really. And there's people leaving Canada at near record paces as well. And that doesn't surprise me one bit. You pick up your life and move it to Canada because you think you're going to have a better life. And when you come here, well, the promise does not meet the reality, that's for sure. Look at how hard it is to rent, how much of a homeless problem we have in Canada, strains on getting healthcare, access to doctors, etc. And so we're seeing people leave Canada in record levels as well. So while right now we're seeing rent go through the roof, we are seeing home prices drop, primarily driven by the fact that interest rates have pushed people out of the market or put a lot of uncertainty in the market. I think this is short-term and temporary. And I'm not saying this is a good thing. This is just what I think is happening, is that we're going to see eventually interest rates are going to work their way down. And even if they don't, people will start getting used to higher interest rates, and they're going to have to buy something eventually or rent forever. And that might be the case for some people. They have to rent forever. And that's not something that's productive for our economy and people and household formation as a whole. But if we continue to bring people to Canada faster than we can build houses for them, eventually the laws of supply and demand rule out, and we will see the cost of housing continue to increase, not only on the rent side, but also on the resale side, and fewer people able to buy a house. That's just the reality of what's happening right now. I don't like it. I don't like saying that, but that's what I think is happening here. And I see this problem getting far worse before it gets better, because right now the government, like I said, I don't think they care at all. I think they want to continue to encourage this because it's a short-term quick fix to a long-term problem that they don't really care to solve. That's enough with the negative talk. It's the Christmas season. I wore my favorite Christmas sweater for this episode. I wanted to wish you all a very Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. I'm not going to be doing a video next week. I'm going to be taking some time off with family and friends. I am going to get that monthly market update long form video out. I'm working on that. I know I'm late. Hopefully I have that out in a couple of days. Maybe it's out by the time you're watching this. As always, if you like this video, give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to Bald Prairie Real Estate. The button's right down there. If you love to learn about the Canadian real estate market, leave me some comments below so we can chat with you guys in the comments section. And thanks very much for watching.